Welcome to the fourth Critique Thursday class, the fourth one. For this class, I asked, we're going to talk about it we are going to, for this class and every future one, I said that anyone who wishes one of their pieces to be critiqued will have to leave a comment of critique on someone else's poem. Interestingly, even though at least for this week I was planning to give a pass to people who have been leaving a critique in class, because that is critique, those people unsurprisingly have been the ones who have mostly left comments. We have had 5 people who left comments of critique. It's actually, I'm going to say that I'm actually not too pleased about this. This is a class. You should consider it as your homework. You don't show up to class without doing your homework. So I will forgive live Russian, but for people who come in later, tell them that I'm disappointed in them, especially because we had a couple of people who received critique more than once and did not leave critique to anyone else, and I think that is unfortunate because that shows that they do know the value of critique. Otherwise they wouldn't have asked for it a second time. But they did shows that they do appreciate it. So I think it's, do unto others as you wish done unto you. And I think that golden rule says everything in this case. Steve isn't here, but his comment was actually went above and beyond what I expected, especially out of him. I'm not saying it as a backhanded compliment, but he really wowed me with his comment. So after this class he's actually going to get free SBD in a second, Daniel. So he's actually going to get free SBD from me as a reward. The rewards, there might be several people who get a reward in a week, there might be none. The reward is for going above and beyond, not for being necessarily the best. There are a couple of people that I will talk to privately because I feel they can do better. I will go over, I think I will write a post outlining some guidelines that might help people who are uncomfortable giving critique, how to give critique. And it's important to say again that when I say critique, I actually mean analysis. You don't have to be negative. You don't have to look for things that don't work. It's enough to speak of how a piece makes you feel and what about it makes you feel in a certain way. So don't be scared. You can be entirely positive and it would be more than fine. Daniel?
Yeah, just to chime in on that, especially people receiving critique multiple times maybe and then not actually following through with leaving it themselves, I wanted to just ask how much that has to do with the two things I see. The fear of not being qualified to leave critique. I always see people say this, oh, well, I'm not a such and such poet, I'm not such and such good analytical thinker, or whatever their reason. And then the second reason is just the sheer amount of psychic energy, just mental energy that it can take to focus on someone's piece. What really is stopping people from doing it? Because when I did Alain's piece, it took me about 35 to 40 minutes. So it took a chunk of time, but what it required me to say was, I'm going to dedicate this part of my day to doing this.
Yes.
Is it just that people don't ever declare that to themselves, or?
First of all, I think it's part of it. When I go into poetry critique mode, I never do it at work or when I'm tired, because I do know I have to focus very strongly. And I usually say I'm going to spend the next 2 hours commentating on pieces. however long it takes. However many pieces I manage to fit into that time period, I will do. And like my comments, as you know, like take a long time. But many people, if you see like their comments, I'll be honest, probably don't take them more than 5 to 10 minutes. Like a couple of we'll talk about it in a minute, girl. Before, but the people. I think that people are two things. First of all, they are too scared of trying, so they don't even get to the stage where they consider allocating the time. They also aren't aware that they need to allocate time, because to know you need to allocate time, you actually need to have left critique before, to know how long it takes you, how much effort it takes you. Many of these people have never done so. How would they know that it takes a lot of psychic and a lot of mental energy and 30 to 40 minutes? They can't know. I think if I'm being generous, I would say that like for many people it would help like once I put up like a post with guidelines of what to look for, how to critique, and once like I reiterate that when I say critique I actually mean analysis, because critique has a negative connotation while analysis is neutral. And many people don't, we spoke of this in the past, don't want to be negative. But if I'm honest and a bit more pessimistic, is I think some people, like many people come to Steemit to earn money. And many people only leave comments on other people's stuff just because they want to be noticed. We actually had someone, I'm not going to name them, in one of our critique lessons, there was someone who wasn't part of the challenge and hadn't been in any lesson before that, and they basically just came because they wanted, their piece to be read and talked about. And I think there are also such people in the challenge that they want to receive more than they are willing to give. And that's something that I am not willing to condone, but that's actually not the main reason that I instituted this requirement. The main reason was actually because I think it will help the people who give a critique, and it will help the people who receive a critique, and it will just spread more poetic goodness in the community, and it will help everyone grow. The fact that it will also stop people trying to only take without giving is a bonus, but was not actually my main goal. I like if I had enough time, I would give critique to anyone and everyone. I'm like most of the people I give critique to don't give me critique back, or not necessarily even reply fully to my critique, because as Daniel said before, and as Nish often says, like just replying to my comments often takes people 30 to 40 minutes and takes just as much mental energy as it takes you to leave comments on other people's stuff. So it's not really about getting as much as I'm giving. I just want to help people, and I think that as a teacher, my job is to push people beyond their comfort zone. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, girl before me said, Guy, my situation makes it hard for me to do too much of anything. I would be happy to sponsor the reward for critic in the interim. Thank you for the kind offer, but if you want, you can give Steve SBD as well as I do, but like I need to give SBD myself to feel like to not be too easy with it because otherwise it's too easy like to give other people's stuff. But again, like if you are just listening to the challenge, then the point with giving critique is challenging yourself. Like you are not giving us pieces to critique for you, but again, if you like have a medical issue and you do want to get a piece of yours critiqued, you can just speak to me and I will make exceptions. Like I'm a very reasonable person, mostly. So yeah. Okay, so who wants to go first? We are going. I actually have a couple of pieces prepared myself, not of mine. Um, but I generally, like to keep my things for later. Daniel, do you have a piece you want to share? Tiger. Okay. No, Daniel, I saw you started talking. I'm just because it took you a while.
I'll see how everyone else does because I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I can be the guinea pig. Hold on.
Though it's not really a guinea pig because this is not our first class. But yeah, like I actually was prepared to say because until yesterday we only had one comment left, and then like pieces more started flowing in. I was going to say that if there won't be more for next week, there won't be a class because if people don't give comments, they also can't get poems critiqued, and if we are not getting poems critiqued, then there's no purpose to have a lesson. You know?
Your lessons are appreciated, love. It's with me. It's number two. One, when I do critique, it's like I get really close to a person. I have to either just really like the piece or really like the person that I do with because it's sort of like it gets a little intimate for me. It's like I give a piece of myself, so I'm like really weird on that. And secondary, my health. My
Yes.
hands have been
Yeah.
my hands have been a bitch of late. It's like they hurt all the time now.
Yeah.
It just really
But
sucks.
yeah, like I said, I actually meant to give a pass to the people who give critique in voice because it is still critique. You know? And let's look at Live Russian's comment. I guess we could consider you Live Russian. I'll give you. Let's see. Actually, no, we can't because it had to be given after last week's class, and you left the comment before last week's class, and that I did specify. Okay, Daniel, do you want to read your piece?
Sure. All right. This piece is called Our Barrier. I am waiting for you at the barrier between us. On the underside of the horizon slope, I cling to boundaries as comforts. The summit of ecstasy now below me, its bald lake is still frigid. Unsanguine, its pleasures are meaningless, while I wait for you. My face becomes a nocturne of hardships through years compressed. The barrier rains into the lake, and part of me slides through droplets. My hands, my thighs, transparencies of fire to mingle with time's clear flame, while I wait for you at the place where the barrier between us dissolves.
Thank you, Daniel. We are now going to take 1 minute to read the piece in quiet, to take it in. Okay, who wants to go first? Daniel obviously doesn't get to critique his own piece, so we are going to need people to speak up today. Katya, do you want to read your comment?
Oh, yeah, if you want, I could start. Maybe I'll add something to my comment. So, okay, I'll read my comment. I felt this poem being all about eternal form of love that is different from love between two people. Because really, people thought, or I don't know, maybe it was tagged that it's about love, and people started to commenting about love, I think, in the beginning, but I didn't feel it like this. Okay, continue.
Yes.
Going through this life, being just a passerby, it's how I felt. And this word, actually, it was not a word, it was lines. Unsanguine and all the line. Sorry, I can't see it because when I'm pushing this.
Yeah. Unsanguine, its pleasures are meaningless while I wait for you.
Yeah, exactly. This line, it gave me this feeling of experiencing a short moment of love, because maybe sometimes through meditation or some prayers, people can shortly experience this eternal love I thought Daniel was talking about. And we know that this love is waiting for us out there beyond, but we are slowly approaching this barrier, the line, and as soon as we cross it, we will, how can I say, we will see this love, we will feel it entirely. And also I love the lines, my face becomes a nocturne of hardships through years compressed, because it made me really feel this temporary nature of our lives. Yeah.
I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Why do you feel this is about a more eternal love, like a religious or spiritual love, rather than a romantic love? Are you there? Katya?
Sorry, I stopped pushing to talk again. Well, for example, you know, the whole poem felt like this to me. When I read it, it was like the first feeling I had. Then I started to read it again, and these lines, for example, its pleasures are meaningless while I wait for you. So I felt like the life here is like, really, it's meaningless compared to some love you experience maybe shortly, but it can't be love between two people, because this love can be experienced multiple times. All the time it's different. I don't know. It's just, I didn't feel this poem talking about this kind of love.
I'm going to reply to you before I let someone else speak up. First of all, I see this as a poem of longing. So, and while, let's say, you are separated from your loved one, even if it's romantic and you can meet them again, it is speaking about the time without them. Or let's say after they died. Let's say that you are a widower, your spouse has died, and you have been single since then, and you are saying I will never be with someone else again. So I can't see it being there. That's the first thing. And interestingly, I wanted to bring up Rumi. Rumi is an Iranian Muslim poet, and in his writing in particular, it's very much seen like much of the writing of divine love can be applied to romantic love and vice versa. Like that's part of many times when people write about romantic love, you could read it as if it's being about the love of a divine, and when people write about love of a divine, they often use romantic love imagery. So it's not like I'm disagreeing with you, but I'm just raising it up as an interesting point regarding this topic.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Someone else wants to talk?
I agree with you on the thing that I think that it's a romantic poem. I'm not sure about death. I think it can be interpreted in many ways, like also maybe a vision of a soulmate that hasn't been fulfilled yet.
Mm-hmm.
Or that the other person is in a circumstance where they can't be together, but they can see each other in a certain way. But basically, that the whole poem is saying that that there's no love that can compare to what they have, because it's beyond basically the physical. It is a soulmate situation. At least that's what I get from the poem on my end.
Okay. Anyone else before I go? Like, nobody has any editing critique to offer Daniel, now that he can no longer edit the piece, so it will haunt him forever and make him very sad.
You're so
Hello.
Hey, Steve.
I don't have any editing critiques, but I do have a holistic reading.
Go for it, Steve.
And it comes from the name, Our Barrier. Barrier for me is kind of a word that can be very concrete, or it can be very abstract. And I think the way it's talked about throughout the poem, it's more of an abstraction. I think Tiger's reading into it as a lover to come. It's kind of about faithfulness. About faithfulness to a lover that you've never met, the ideal that you want to hold on to and keep. And it's about the struggle with the meantime. So the barrier is basically represents being, especially he talks about looking at it from different angles, like rising up and looking down, and so it's more of just an understanding of where the poet's at in the longing for that lover and taking the necessary time to not jump into anything with anyone else because he's devoted to this lover to come. So the barrier is just that time that's keeping them apart. So it's just the time, and it's kind of about him looking at that time and seeing it. And the part where it says the barrier rains into the lake and part of me slides through droplets, it's almost like he has experienced things that have let him understand this love to come, but the barrier is still there, and it won't be gone until the actual person is in his life. So that's kind of my holistic reading on it.
Before I let someone else speak or speak myself, I quite like how this poem, like in particular, because Daniel, it's like a weakness / strength, what they call a feature / bug. Daniel never tells us what the barrier is. He doesn't actually, and he paints it in a very broad and abstract stroke. So, like, each person that you will ask what do you feel the barrier is going to give a different answer that is very much dependent on their vision of life and love. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer specifically about what the barrier is, and that's both a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because it allows people to read more into the poem, and it's a weakness because Daniel has a tendency to not put himself into his poems. Anyone else wants to go about Daniel's piece before I go? Okay, so I will go. First of all, in terms of punctuation, I like that there is no punctuation necessarily at the last two couplets, but then why is it even a couplet? I think like here you just kept it as a couplet because you wrote everything as a couplet up to this point. I don't feel it serves any purpose. I do think that it would have actually made the ending stand out more if you had changed it and made it a quatrain here. In the first couplet, there's a missing period at the end of it. I'm not in love of Nocturne. Nocturne, for those who don't know, is a form of how to say it. It's a form of a music composition. Like, I feel that this word specifically evokes the image of night because nocturnus from Latin.
Love, your mic is dying.
How about now?
Can hear you now.
Okay, so I'm going to read from Wikipedia. Nocturne, composition piece. A nocturne is usually musical composition that is inspired by or evocative of night. And I feel that this word here is weak and doesn't tie into the rest of the imagery in the piece. I would have liked a word like dirge if you want to be harsher, or litany for it to tie into the hardships. And unsanguine I actually like, but I think also like the unsanguine followed immediately by the nocturne is a bit much. My hands, my thighs, transparencies of fire to mingle with time's clear flame. The image of flame here, it doesn't play off of the image of water you've used up to now, and so it feels, again, it feels as if it doesn't belong. I don't like it. I have to agree with Live Russian that apart from the nocturne, my face becomes a nocturne of hardships through years compressed is a beautiful line. I really like it. The summit of ecstasy now below me. It's the question here is, how did you, like, I would have personally added something because you say below me, not behind me. So it means that you think you ascended higher, but this whole piece is not about ascending. It's until the end. This piece is about cleaning. You even say that it's about cleaning. So I don't necessarily agree with that image. Someone's microphone is making noise. It's bold lake still frigid. I'm going to ask you, what does a bold lake mean? Like, I can see sort of like an image, like a kappa, like but again, like, I think that this image is, I don't think it meshes well. I think like some of the imagery in this piece could be retuned to work stronger together. Yeah, although later Sunshine is pleasures are meaningless while I wait for you is sort of like going beyond it, but I think like to say, let's say, the mountain of ecstasy now behind me would personally feel better. The barrier rains into the lake. Okay, I'm going to have to find who it is that is making all this noise. The barrier rains into the lake is an interesting line because the barrier here, like if something rains into the lake, so to speak, it gives the impression as if it is a barrier of rain, but also as if it's raining away, as if it's going away, which could be like leading into what is following, but I'm not sure if that is what you intended already. Okay, Daniel, do you have anything you want to say?
Not really, as far as the the speculations on the meaning of the piece, although I will confirm that what you said is very accurate about this being a weakness and a strength, and something that I intend on many pieces, which is to leave a lot of space for interpretations to be made, and I find those fascinating. And just thank you for all of the very perceptive things that you just said. One of the reasons why I wanted to get this one critiqued is I felt that there was potential here. It was a bit different than I normally write, actually a bit more personal than I'm usually comfortable with writing and with sharing. And I see this piece as something that could be potentially extended into a much larger piece, which is why I wanted to get it critiqued to see what was working.
You're welcome. I'm just going to say on this info, it is almost personal. I think like you are putting some of yourself in it, but you are unwilling to actually say that you are putting yourself in your piece, which is something to keep in mind.
1 foot out of the wallpaper.
Yeah, and to answer on the bald lake, I'm not sure that it was actually explained properly. I don't think that phrase actually conveys what I was thinking, but I was thinking, kind of a mount, because I was really bald more describes the top of the mountain. It would be kind of like a lake on top of a mountain that doesn't have many, it's bald because it doesn't have many trees.
Yeah, and Bald Mountain always makes me think of what's the name of that piece? Mussorgsky, Night on Bald Mountain. Like now that's a piece. Okay, who wants to go next? Steve, do you have a piece to share?
Yeah, I do actually. Give me a second, I'll drop it right now.
By the way, I have a surprise for you all later on the piece we are going to critique, to drive home the fact that critique is actually analysis, and that you can critique anyone and everyone. We are going to critique a poem by one of the greats. Okay, Steve, do you want to read your piece, or will Daniel read it? Okay.
Yeah, I can read it today.
Go ahead.
All right. This one is called Freedom's Respite. All right. We often get loud around here. I wish it were not so. Let's adjust our method. Let's think before we speak. Let's restrict our freedom a bit. I want the peace of a quiet stream. I don't want bulldozers on a construction site. We can go around, or we can stop and breathe, for as long as it takes to ease the sharp edges into the corner pockets. Jamming them in is causing pierced skin, or bruises that take too long to heal. I put olive oil in a pan and cook you an omelet.
Okay. Okay, we are now going to take a minute to read this piece in quiet, to take it in. Steve, you need to turn off your microphone.
Thank you.
Okay, who wants to go first? Daniel, because you just got critiqued and we just spoke at the beginning of class on the value of giving back. You are going to go first. I'm volunteering you.
Okay. Give me a second.
Okay, while you are taking a minute, Steve, I have a recommendation. Add the name of a poem to your submission title on Steemit. because now if people go to your profile, they have no idea how to find a specific piece. So, and you want to help people find your pieces. Like if they want to share a specific piece they liked, you don't want to make it hard for them to find it.
On a completely different note, Daniel, is the bot problem fixed or is it still the same drizzle?
I believe it is. I do see RhythmBot exists again.
Then I might actually share my, I have two to offer, but we will do Steve
Okay.
first and then
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can speak on this one now.
Mhm.
I keep clicking on the wrong window. Okay, so first I'm going to go opposite than what I probably should. I just want to do my impressions. I feel like there's a tongue-in-cheek perhaps here, especially because you ended off, the conclusion is really not a conclusion. You know, it's you cooking an omelet, which is maybe, though, the scene in which you're having these ruminations. And the way that I read the beginning two stanzas especially is the sort of feeling you sometimes get when in the midst of, you know, the chaos of life, that you feel that the chaos is just bothersome, and, you know, why does life have to be so loud? Why does it have to be so exuberant, and these sort of things? And it's kind of like shrinking into yourself. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were thinking, but it may not be so, because you're saying, let's think before we speak, let's restrict our freedom. And that could be sarcastic, or it could be saying just to restrict our freedom, not in a negative sense, but let's have better self-control. And then when you get to the third stanza, this one seems pretty abstract to me. We can go around. I'm not sure if we can go around is just referring to going around the construction site. That's why it's abstract to me. I think maybe it's saying we can go around obstacles in general. We can stop and breathe. There is a typo there on breathe. It says breath. For as long as it takes to ease the sharp edges into the corner pockets. Obviously, I have an image of billiards from corner pocket, although I don't think that that's what was intended, maybe.
I do think it was intended. Like,
Okay.
if you say corner pockets, I think if you don't intend billiards, then you need to edit it, because you are inviting it.
Right, it's too strong of a connotation with that phrase, if that's not what's intended. I believe that the hyphen on line 2 should have been an M dash. I think that's what you were going for. Otherwise, jamming them in is causing pierced skin. I kind of appreciated that in terms. It was welcome for me. Or bruises that take too long to heal. Yeah, I'm not sure I comprehend the third stanza completely, and I'm not sure that all of the phrases there were completely working. For me, at least, I was having trouble connecting when the piece became, I wouldn't say violent, but a little more graphic, as far as like there's sharp edges, pierced skin, and bruises. Interesting. Yeah, I think that's all I have for now. I am always a fan of the absurd type conclusions where they don't conclude, but it just, I think, resolves into maybe the moment that you're having, the rumination in life, and kind of showing the significance of the ordinary.
Thank you, Daniel. Your turn, Tiger.
Okay, I interpret this whole thing this way. He, in my opinion, is talking about how people treat each other when it comes to differing opinions, and the world is basically really abrasive towards each other. So when he says we often get loud around here, he means the world in itself. We scream each other's opinions like in our faces, and we're hurting each other and on a massive scale. And then when he says, I wish it were not so, he's trying to find a better way to do this, to have this communication with each other. And then with his, I want the peace of a quiet stream, I don't want bulldozers. It's all just very, it's very, those sentences are all very literal. He wants a world that is calm, where people just basically work together, and where things are in a flow and not in constant turmoil and war. Now, when it comes to the we can go around, I interpret that whole thing completely different than Daniel does. When he says we can go around, for me that sentence implies we can go around and in circles basically, and bark at each other and hurt each other and keep on screaming our truths without listening to each other. Or we can stop and breathe. So we can stop and breathe, and we can start trying to see each other's point of view and find some common ground. For as long as it takes to ease the sharp edges. What he means with the sharp edges, in my opinion, is the conflict, the things that are so different in each other that it makes us bristle. So for as long as it takes, let us take time to breathe and try to get it and to know each other until we resolve these sharp edges that are cause of our wars. And two, when he says that we're jamming those sharp edges into our corner pockets, it's sort of like we compartmentalize, and we just sort of like we try to force it. We try to force the narrative, and that's what's causing us to hurt each other. The pierced skin, the bruises, it's these things that we don't like about each other. We just basically try to shove them somewhere where it just constantly causes pain and suffering. And he's saying we have to find a way to breathe and find a way to ease them, because we can't make them disappear completely, but that where we can ease them into a state where we can live with each other. That's at least what I get. And when it comes to the olive oil in a pan and I'll cook you an omelet, number one, that is like the most disgusting thing I've ever heard, just, on a culinary level.
Please, Tiger.
But what I think he means when it comes to this, I think cooking an omelet, there's this American saying that to get something done, you have to break eggs. You have to make an omelet, or you have to make eggs to make an omelet, which means you have to do something, or you have to become active to change something. And I think that's what he's trying to imply here. This, I put the olive oil in a pan, is like, I am extending the olive branch so that we can make this omelet that we have to break eggs for, and that is my interpretation of the piece.
Anyone else wants to go before I go?
Okay, I will add something.
Go ahead, Live Russian.
I felt it similarly to Tiger, but last two lines, they helped me to understand that he's talking not about strangers, not about just people around us. I think he's talking about people who live together, about family or someone you just live together with. And all these things about sharp edges, yeah, I agree with Tiger that it's because we are different. And instead of speaking, because people, they always speak and they hurt each other with words. And it causes this pierced skin and bruises, yeah, that take too long to heal, because words, they can hurt more than how can I say it, physical
violence
attacks, violence. Yeah, that's how I felt. And this last lines, they are just that's something he would do for his for his wife. I don't know, because he loves her. That's how I felt it.
Okay, I am going to go now. First of all, I'm also happy Yahia is here for this one in particular, because Yahia is a big fan of the value of silence, which even though I speak a lot, I agree with him about the value of silence. I'm actually going to, for later, not now, to link you to what I think is the anthem of silence, which is Silence Must Be Heard by the Enigma project from about 15 years ago or so, this song. Before I start with my analysis, I actually do want to take on a couple of the things said by other people here. I'll start by saying, like, today, for those who don't know, was the Israeli Memorial Day for the Holocaust victims and bravery, for the Nazi Holocaust, that is. And one of the things that disappointed me a bit was that I wrote a post about it yesterday, and many of the comments I received were about nationalism and patriotism. And what I think is that this is a deeper solidarity, the solidarity of the people who, like in Israel, stand in silence for 2 minutes in remembrance of all the Holocaust victims. It's solidarity not just with the Jewish people who died during the Holocaust, it's solidarity with humanity. So for me, even if I take Katya's comment on I put olive oil in a pan and cook you an omelette for it being someone you care about, I would still stress that it should be about something larger, that solidarity not just with the people we live with, but solidarity with the entire human people, with all the people. And before I go onward, I want to say that we can go around. I can see both meanings that both Daniel and Tiger put forth, and I find it very interesting because we can go around, or we can stop and breathe. And we can go around the sharp edges or the construction site, indeed, in case it's not an exclusive or it can be, as Tiger said, that it's either we are going, either we speak around one another, or we can stop and breathe and listen to one another. Okay, so if we go about the piece, the way I saw the last 2 lines was an example of not saying anything on purpose. I did see it as a sort of Zen comment to say, here is me not saying anything. Do you have anything to say? Like, here is me saying something that is not hurtful. But if that is indeed what was meant, then I think it is very weak in a way, because this piece has something to say. After you have something to say, you shouldn't unsay it, so to speak. Like, you should finish on a strong note if you are actually trying to teach people to be better people. I really don't like I want the peace of a quiet stream. I don't want bulldozers on construction site. That couplet is a perfect example of saying, like, the piece speaks for itself. Why, after you have the first stanza and the second and the third one, why do you feel the need to actually tell us, I want peace and quiet, I want serenity, I don't want everyone talking too loudly? You already showed it to us. There is no reason to tell it to us at this point. That's unfortunate. Let's restrict our freedom a bit. I actually thought not just of freedom of speech here and the hurtful of words, like, because of the context of that I know Steve is American, I thought of also of gun legislation. And if we are talking about freedom of speech, like as people say, you have a freedom of speech to speak, but you don't have a freedom of to be heard. But if you keep shouting at me, I don't have to listen to you. And this piece does speak to that as well. There's for people who are old enough to have used walkie-talkies, which I think is not a lot of people here. When you broadcast, you can't receive, and people are trying too much to care too much about being heard, when actually listening to other people. I agree with Daniel that like I did understand the third stanza that we should listen to one another because otherwise it causes hurts, but I think the imagery is a bit off in this stanza and could be made stronger. Steve, do you have anything to say? You muted your microphone, by the way, because you had too much noise picking up earlier.
All right. You did hear me, though, say thank you?
No.
Oh, just now. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for taking the time to read my poem and give me a critique.
You are welcome, Steve. Who wants to be next? Tiger, do you want to try and make use of a rhythm bot?
I have two poems to offer. I have the angel poem that some of people have heard, which I actually really like a lot. But if people are too tired to hear it again, then I have another one to offer.
The one you want to get critiqued, because let's be honest, most of the other classes, when people read their pieces, they aren't actually getting critiqued, right?
Right. All right. So let's do the angel one then, because I'd really like to share one more time. 1 minute. You find it, Daniel. You know how to put it into the rhythm bot, right? There we go.
Okay. Wait a second. I'm going to check its length just to make sure. No, that's 300 words. Poems should be up to 250 words. So, Tiger, what is the other poem?
Alright, hang on.
Immediately as I looked at it, I sensed a disturbance in the force. Oh, and you got cured. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is the other one.
And yeah, I also dropped it in the aisle because, you know, we like to let people know when islanders have been cured.
Thank you. I'm not really good at self-promotion. I sort of,
Yeah.
unless it's like in like I not that I'm like I'm not humble. You know, I'm not humble. But it's like, but self-promotion is not my thing. It's just an honor thing, you know.
Okay, Daniel, do you want to play this version using the rhythm bot? Okay. And yes, I'm ready.
Color me beautiful. Let the cool ripples of your touch wash away all sin. League of 1,000 promises embedded in fragile space. I shall unearth them all for you. To get lost in the elegant curve of your lips. And the endless length of your lashes is a tempting pursuit. I hide behind smiles and wiles and an aloof dignity that you irreverently ignore. If it were not so enchanting, I would take offense of your breaching of my castle. But here I am, sapling reaching skyward to grasp a fraction of the radiant glow you nonchalantly emanate. I, used to the terrifying burden of blind devotion, have become satellite eclipsed. And this you have given me the greatest gift of all. You see me as I am, in all my greatness and fallibility, and remain unimpressed by their implications. You appreciate the girl within the goddess, find refuge in the calm of my storm. I find rebirth in the strength of your embrace and the hardness between your thighs. I could spend eternity in the movements of our lovemaking and our after-hour conversations. I would need no food or drink or air to breathe, as the knowledge of your existence has rendered me immortal. At the edge of Armageddon, our salvation lies in the first crucial breach of my boundaries. Your hand on mine.
Okay, that piece, because its name was not given in the piece, is "Love is a minefield that blows us in place." And now we are going to take a minute or two to read it on our own. Okay, this is quite a piece. Who wants to brave its depths? Anyone? Okay, live Russian is
I'm a slow reader.
yeah, but
Sorry.
Live Russian wrote quite a piece. I wouldn't dare to comment. But Live Russian, that's exactly it. Every piece, no piece is beyond us to comment on. If it is beyond us to comment on, then it means that the author failed in communicating in it. That's my take. Like, even if it was too private, she wouldn't have shared it. Like, have you been here on Monday when I read The Ring? So that piece is like over 700 words, and it's private in the way you mean, as in soul bearing. But if you don't dare to comment on it, then I think a poet fails. Like, so be brave, Katya. Be brave. Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, normally for a piece like this, I would like more time and to go and get deeper into it, but just so I can give other people more time to go over it, I'll go ahead, because I do have some things already to say. So I do want to have that just caveat. This is there's a lot of depth here. It is a bit longer than some of them. Immediately, I like sometimes to start with even the conclusions of the pieces, because I think this has a lot to do with tying up the entire meaning, which, however, struck me a little differently than the title, "Love is a Minefield That Blows Us in Place." And I know we've talked about titles before, and I know the Tiger's philosophy on titles. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was kind of slapped on, but I'm not sure that was what the piece was saying. but I'll have to just keep that under consideration. I noticed the theme of Armageddon, which has been in some of your other pieces before. And the strongest thing I notice about the conclusion of the piece is that it's in the conditional, meaning that this would tend to portray the entire piece as perhaps an imagination more so than something that has come completely to fruition, or that it came to fruition in the past, a past that now feels distant. Because you say, I would need no food or drink or air to breathe, as the knowledge of your existence has rendered me immortal. The edge of Armageddon, our salvation lies in the first crucial breach of my boundaries, your hand on mine. Which is a very nice line, and perhaps also a testament to the strength of your boundaries. There's a lot in the piece. So, first of all, I actually like how it's laid out in poetic prose. I think that as long as that's a conscious choice and not something that just seemed to be easier, because it could certainly be structured as a traditional, well, it could be structured in stanzas with shorter lines, but I do think it's a decent choice for this type of piece to structure it, and I like that they're appreciable lengths, except for the fourth one is shorter, which is good because the lines that are there are very powerful, so it sort of emphasizes the compression aspect. There's a lot of religious undertones in this piece. It starts with sin and it ends with Armageddon and salvation. So, in a sense, I think it's a bold statement in a way, saying that the here and now, the sensations, the physical, this is sacred, and this is what will make me clean of sin, and that will be my salvation. To get lost in the elegant curve of your lips and the endless length of your lashes is a tempting pursuit. For some reason, pursuit snagged me. I was almost wanting endeavor or something like this. Attempting, I'm not sure. Although, it's interesting to say pursuit, because that would mean that it's not something automatic. It implies to me, because typically a pursuit means that you actually have to make some effort. So that's why I think I snagged on it, because I'm not sure if you're saying I would have to take quite a bit of effort to get lost in these curves, which is not what seems to be implied by the statement. It seems to imply that it's actually very easy. However, it could be a different kind of meaning shard of the word pursuit. It could just be the meaning of, an activity. I don't want to make my comments go on too long, because this is a long piece. Could keep on going on. So I want to let someone else speak.
Okay, who wants to go next? Steve, are you ready? Or do you want me to go first?
I'm ready.
Go ahead, Steve. Steve.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to change my voice activity. All right. I, like Daniel, read a whole lot into this poem that is hard to really talk about, really. But for me, there's kind of a playfulness, but it's obscured by the directness, where it's almost like Tiger's name, Tiger, like, and that word pursuit, it's almost like tigers in pursuit. And I think, this isn't really about, like, something that is actually happening, physically happening, even though it definitely reads that way. And the only reason why I think that is because there's a lot of dancing around, like almost like a tiger circling, and there's moments where the tiger goes in real close and makes it feel like it's something that could be happening, but then there's so much of the circling that it makes me think that it's not really actually about physical lovemaking, even when at the end of the second to last stanza, it brings lovemaking into the poem. So I think this is my holistic reading of this. My thing is I've been listening closely to Tiger since we started this whole thing, and she talks about how she hasn't really opened up in ages, and this class has kind of done that for her. So I think this is kind of like her way of telling us that what's going on with her right now is directly it's directly from a relationship that's been built with us, as far as we see her in a way that maybe she hasn't experienced before, and she's kind of reacting to it in these kind of ways that are aggressive in some ways, but in others, I don't know, because towards the end, it talks about your hand in mine, and for me that just means that for her, even though we're not all together, we are. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. That's kind of my holistic view.
Thank you, Steve. It's reminding me something I thought earlier about your piece, that you could also, in some ways, have read it as if it were about this class, the poetry critique class, about listening and hurting one another and stuff like that. Okay, I guess I will go now. First of all, in terms of typos and such, the last stanza, I would need no food or drink or air to breathe. You wrote breath. Unlike Daniel, I simply think that the wood here is a mistake. I think it just need to be, I need no food or drink or air to breathe, as the knowledge of your existence has rendered me immortal, because I think that's, and if not, I think you should consider it because it's stronger. I find the word immortal here a bit problematic because you're already a goddess before meeting him, and you say it several times, and the goddess is immortal. In the third stanza, you appreciate the girl within the goddess, find refuge in the calm of my storm. You either miss a period there after goddess, and then, Steve, you need to turn off your microphone. And then it's, you appreciate the girl within the goddess, period. And then like a command, find refuge in the calm of my storm. Or you need something to end something, you need some connecting word there to make it work. League of 1,000 promises. I think the word league here is a bit loose. It doesn't tie well enough if you ask me. You wrote, I hide behind smiles and wiles. I think you meant to write wiles without an H, like womanly wiles, but I'm not sure. By the way, this moment reminded me of one of Nietzsche's old spoken word pieces where she writes wiles and wiles in the two meanings, and it reminded me of it. I also think she will quite like this piece of yours. Just saying. I also linked it to her because I think she'll love it. I think I don't like and the hardness between your thighs. I don't feel it actually adds anything to the piece. I feel like it's not that it's crass, but it's, in my mind, it's not good. Like I don't actually like it doesn't track, as I sometimes say when something like I feel like it doesn't fit the rest of the piece. At the edge of Armageddon, I think it should be something like at the edge of our Armageddon, and then like you remove a second hour. At the edge of our Armageddon, salvation lies in the first crucial breach of my boundaries. Your hand on mine. I'm a bit troubled because you go again for that first breach, but he already breached you prior, because if it were not so enchanting, I would take offense of your breaching of my castle. By the way, it should be at your breaching of my castle. But here, the whole second stanza is about being grateful for his breaching. So the first breaching coming again at the final stanza seems a bit problematic to me. Answering Daniel, like I feel like it's not exactly religious, because even though she does use some of that imagery, because I feel like she's talking about she's mixing a bit the metaphors or the mythologies, shall we say, because she's speaking of the goddess, and it could be like read as the goddess versus the Abrahamic god. I, used to the terrifying burden of blind devotion, have become a satellite eclipsed. You're missing an A here as well. I think like it's an interesting piece, and I really like the first stanza. I like a lot. Like, and the second one, I like how she's speaking of shedding off her. The speaker is shedding off her shell, is being made weak again, and appreciates it, because being strong all the time is a burden. Yes, and I will obviously clarify for work science, but I think like later, after I find rebirth in the strength of your embrace, I feel like things go a bit weaker after that. I feel like the piece becomes shouty, as if you are trying to hammer at us with things, rather than go with a very gentle way you've explored things up to that point. Okay, I'm going to answer Wax Science. Wax Science writes, isn't the rule I need to comment on other poems to receive critique here? And no, you need to comment in order to be able to put forth your own pieces to get critique. But everyone is welcome to give critique, otherwise how could you receive critique? Even if you had not left a comment, you are more than welcome to give critique in this class.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah, okay. Katya wanted to say something. Katya?
Yeah, if I can. It's just I didn't like when you said poet fails, so I want to say something.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I liked a lot when she's talking about a castle. It's like she's protective, and it's not easy to connect with her. And then there is this image of a sapling. Do I pronounce it right? Sapling?
Sapling.
Sapling, reaching skyward to grasp a fraction of the radiant glow you... Okay, didn't know how to pronounce that.
Emanate.
It's also very, very beautiful, because we saw a castle and now we see this sapling, which is really fragile. So in fact, she is really, really fragile, hiding inside of this castle, behind of it maybe. I like these lines. What did I want to say?
Thank you. I want actually to... I'm sure Tiger didn't intend it, but that line made me think of Jack and the magic beans, because he uses the bean sapling to climb to the giant's castle in the clouds. Anyone else wants to say something about Tiger's piece? Okay, Tiger, do you have anything you want to say?
The tense is intentional. I'm not going to go into the whys right now because I'm going to let the rest of your critiques sit in, but that is intentional. However, yes, you were right with a lot of the misspellings because I cannot spell for the life of me in any of the languages that I speak. So thank you for that. And thank you for your appreciation and critique.
Okay, now I'm going to give us all a surprise. We are going to read a poem by Percy Shelley, who is considered one of the greats, and we are going to critique it. And one of the reasons we are going to critique it is exactly because what Live Russian and I discussed prior, which when she said that she's feeling too intimidated to comment on this piece. And again, it's twofold. First of all, I feel like you always have, like, no piece is beyond critique. Second of all, when I say critique, I mean analysis. Like, you can be all positive, and that's fine. So, let's see if Alain is here, because he's in the channel. Because if he is here, because he's the one who actually linked me this poem when we spoke of usage of dialogue tags, because he kept using them and I kept telling him they didn't work. And here as well, do you want to read Shelley's piece, Alain? Sure, you can always say something. Go ahead, Daniel.
I wanted to just say that one of the factors in people saying, "Oh, this is such a piece, wow, I just don't know what to say." I really think that some of it is not that they don't have anything to say, but they have a lot to say because you took away a lot of impressions for the piece, and that then you need to do the work of sit with it for a moment and then see which of all of the things that you felt or saw in the piece that you want to begin with saying. You just need to just start somewhere with what you say.
Definitely, you can even bullet point it. You don't have to make it one cohesive article on a poem. You can simply write one. I thought about this line XYZ. I thought about the second line. I didn't like this word use, and so on and so forth. Okay, Alain, you're up. And give us the name of the piece.
Yeah, this is a piece called A Dialogue, which is the reason why I thought of it when I was thinking of dialogue pieces to kind of research to figure out what they might look like. This is by Percy Shelley, famous romantic poet. And yes, if you would like to read along, please go to the Steemitschool live class chat channel, and I'm going to start reading. Death. For my dagger is bathed in the blood of the brave. I come, careworn tenant of life from the grave, where innocence sleeps 'neath the peace-giving sod, and the good cease to tremble at tyranny's nod. I offer a calm habitation to thee. Say, victim of grief, wilt thou slumber with me? My mansion is damp, cold silence is there, but it lulls in oblivion the fiends of despair. Not a groan of regret, not a sigh, not a breath, dares dispute with grim silence the empire of death. I offer a calm habitation to thee. Say, victim of grief, wilt thou slumber with me? Mortal. Mine eyelids are heavy, my soul seeks repose. It longs in thy cells to embalm its woes. It longs in thy cells to deposit its load, where no longer the scorpions of perfidy goad, where the phantoms of prejudice vanish away, and bigotry's bloodhounds lose scent of their prey. Yet tell me, dark death, when thine empire is o'er, what awaits on futurity''s mist-covered shore? Death. Cease, cease, wayward mortal, I dare not unveil the shadows that float o'er eternity's veil. Naught waits for the good but a spirit of love that will hail their blessed advents to regions above. For love, mortal, gleams through the gloom of my sway, and the shades which surround me fly fast as its ray. Hast thou loved? Then depart from those regions of hate, and in slumber with me blunt the arrows of fate. I offer a calm habitation to thee. Say, victim of grief, wilt thou slumber with me? Mortal. Oh, sweet is thy slumber, oh, sweet is the ray, which after thy night introduces the day. How concealed, how persuasive self-interest's breath, though it floats to mine ear on the bosom of death. I hoped that I quite was forgotten by all, yet a lingering friend might be grieved at my fall, and duty forbids, though I languish to die, when departure might heave virtue's breast with a sigh. O death, O my friend, snatch this form to thy shrine, and I fear, dear destroyer, I shall not repine.
Thank you, Elaine. Before I give people a minute to read it on their own, I want to go over some of the words for those who are not native English speakers. Repine is to feeling discontent or to fret. Thy is yours. Thine is the same. Thee and thou are different forms of you. There was another word that really came out to me. Wilt is will. Hast is has or had. There was one more thing here. Well, if someone has any questions on the words in English, please ask them in the chat, so we could help. And yeah, let's take a minute to read it. Perfidy, I know what it means, but I don't know how to explain it. But perfidy is deceitfulness. Yes, perfidy is deceitfulness. Okay, let's take a minute to read it. Okay, Elaine, you are not going first because you know what I want to say, and when you are going to say. Okay, anyone wants to go? And remember, the entire point is that even though this poet is extremely well known and is regarded as one of the greats, I don't think this piece is perfect. So who wants to comment on it? By the way,
is there anything on this planet that you think is perfect, my love?
yes, there are. Like, I even have some comments saying, about like some anime series which I analyzed. Even though it has flaws, it's perfect. I don't think it's contradictory in art, because it means that like the small flaws don't actually make something not perfect. And yes, some people who are overly analytical have an issue with that. By the way, I have not read any literary analysis of this poem, so I do, like, you know, one of the issues many people, including myself, had with literature classes in high school is that there is a so-called correct interpretation, and they are trying to force you onto it. And if you say something else, even though it might have merit, they will just shrug it off. Here, we all have the gift that we have not read what it's supposed to mean, so we can be ignorant and free in our critique. Okay, Daniel, it seems that you are going first anyway.
Yeah, I tried.
Yes.
Okay, so it was good to hear it from Elaine read and then to read over it again. Because, you know, hearing it read, you know, it's very melodious and very elegant, and it draws you in. But the more, when I was looking at it over myself, I did have some things that kind of made me scratch my head a bit. For instance, I just feel like there's many contradictions within the piece, and I know that they're intentional by a large part to give this a conversational feeling, because it's framed as a dialogue, and the way that it unfolds, you would expect maybe death to be more godly, how could you say it, more divine, more infallible, but actually the way that he writes death's dialogue is just like another mortal. That's how it reads to me. So to go more specific,
more deified. That's actually a word.
Yeah. The first thing that caught my eye there, I think, is the fact that death is coming to gamble with the mortal and try to convince the mortal to come to death's side, because he keeps asking, or it keeps asking, victim of grief, will you slumber with me? But, okay, so he's asking, and where were some of the odd contradictions I was seeing? There's a lot of mixed imagery, I feel like, playing off of the popular view of death, you know, that it's damp, it's cold and silent, it lulls in oblivion, the fiends of despair, but it also says calm habitation to thee. So I'm trying to, you know, see it.
I think his entire point is that not even a sigh or a groan disturb the silence. So he's offering him a calm habitation where there is nothing to disturb his peace.
That makes sense in the first stanza. And then, so far as I saw, the only this level of heavy repetition happen here. It longs in thy cells to embosom its woes. It longs in thy cells to deposit its load. I was wondering if his repetition was kind of trying to portray that the repetitiveness of life and the weariness that he feels through this repetition. In any case,
I personally hear at least, sorry I'm disrupting you, I feel it's the result of repetition of life. It says how much he longs to cease living. Yeah, and it's definitely about Tiger writing is, I think it had to do with the fact he was known to be clinically depressed. For me, it is him thinking of killing himself. She's speaking of the author, but not even necessarily the author. Death is inviting the mortal to commit suicide here.
Okay. I would not have read that in at all, to be honest. It read more to me as someone who was... Okay.
Well, he's saying
yeah,
he's saying victim of grief. If you look at it, okay, you have to think about the time it was read and the way people talked at that time. And he's saying like victim of grief. Do you want to come? Come, sleep with me. Come and do my bit.
And there is, I come, careworn tenant of life for the grave, and I offer a calm habitation to thee, basically offering him surcease from life. Okay, Daniel, we are going to stop disrupting. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
No problem. Thanks. Okay, so continuing on to the third stanza, Death's reply to the mortal. This is where I found the most contradictions, and again, I do think that it perhaps had to do with the general conception of the wiliness of death, and of course, death was equated with Satan, and it was the way that it was looked on. I think it seems very Luciferian, because he's like playing a lot of different roles. Oh, cease, wayward mortal, don't ask me about these things, but then I'm going to tell you all about it. Like, I dare not unveil the shadows, but then not, and then he tells you exactly what it is. So that part was a little confusing to me, or what's the word? Theatrical, very theatrical. Of course, again, he equates himself with love. Death equates himself with love and says, get out of these regions of hate, which is, again, seems like a sleight of hand on the part of death, saying that, just equating that everything on this realm is hate. This, again, goes into, I think, the prevalent theology of this separationism between the physical and the spiritual. What were you going to say, Tiger? I think I heard you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was being rude, but what I was trying to tell you was that it has a lot to do, if you know the historic time period. Basically, Byron and his wife Mary, they were like big proponents of this new Gothic movement where they were very dramatic and very much into ghouls and spiritism and all that kind of stuff. His wife, Mary Shelley, she's the one who wrote Frankenstein. So they brought up this whole,
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's why.
And this is the good thing. I've studied all this in high school and I've forgotten all of it, which is good because I can just read it without knowing anything about this person. And I actually don't really care to. I don't need to know anything about the person to read the piece. I wonder about that element of critique. There's a lot of ways where you can have confounding variables come in, and I think they do have to do with the piece, but overall, I'm going to keep on going. That's good to know, and I do remember that. Again, there's a lot of contradictions in the end, so see, the thing is, now that you've told me that the whole suicide angle, then I'm forced to consider it from that angle, which is not how I read it at all. But now that I know that, I see the struggle in the last stanza because the mortal is wanting to go really badly. Oh, sweet is thy slumber, sweet is the ray, I want to go. But what if there's a friend that might be grieved? And the duty of staying here, forbids me to leave. But then he seems to say, I guess he overcomes that kind of his hesitation, and wants to go. He asks Death to snatch the form.
Yeah, that specific line can be read in two ways, which is interesting because you can also read it as if telling Death, take yourself to your shrine. But it could be seen as both ways. But here's my big question. How did you like this piece? Did you like it? Like this is part
I
of
like
why, yeah, this is part of why I brought it, because I want us. What did you like about it? Like now you did your critique, so to speak. Now
Yeah.
give me the very much more holistic take. What did you think of this piece? What did you like about it? Like in broad strokes. And what didn't you like about it?
Yeah, I liked this. I liked the dramatic sense. I did like the anthropomorphizing of death, because it seemed to be sort of comical and self-aware rather than the typical sort of, what could you say, ignorant way of making everything human. So it seemed very, conscious of making death into this being that took on a sense of mortality, if only just to speak with the mortal. Listening to it, it was, I really liked the flow of it. The back and forth was very nice, because each statement of the mortal and then of death, there was enough development and enough ambiguity that it made you kind of look forward to the next response. There definitely were things that I didn't like about it as much, and I think that they were interrelated with the things I did like. Kind of like the double-edged sword of this dramatic sense made it not as, like, to me it came off as more playful and over the top, so it didn't really evoke a whole lot of emotion for me. It didn't come off as something could come off that was talking about, death and suicide and deep things. It didn't really have that gravity for me.
Okay.
So that could be a weakness or a strength.
But we do have to remind you that you did not actually notice that it is about suicide. So obviously the gravity didn't hit you. But I wanted to say, I'm sorry it took me a while, but I actually figured in the second stanza what he's saying, because you and then we as well read it wrong. Hast thou loved, then depart from these regions of hate, and in slumber with me blunt the arrows of fate. The regions of hate, he's talking again about life, but life is the region of hate.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's the regions of hate are not the realm of death. So he's saying that if you've loved, then it's even better to be with him, because after death's realm ends, he will go to heaven, and while he is in realm's death, he will not even be bothered by the shades that surround death. Unlike the people who did not love, that are going to disappear, I guess, and be tormented by the shades while they're in the realm of death. Okay, anyone else? Alain, Alain, please speak out loud. Stop writing.
Oh no.
No. Okay. Read what you want to say. Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. The strengths that I have, right, because you're recording it. The strengths that I have for the class or for this poem is, I think the rhythm is really fantastically done. The consistent pacing is something that makes the piece, the intangible word flow through it very fluidly, consistently. It is inviting. The wordplay throughout is very clever, and I think that the first stanza in particular is actually perfect. It's just such a good, strong introduction to what the poem is going to be about. There's a lot of really strong words and concepts that are introduced, but not in a way that's overwhelming, but in a way that kind of gives you perspective on what you're about to read and what the dialogue is. Introduces some of the concepts also that are going to be kind of used throughout it, which I really appreciate. And I think it's a good use of dialogue. On the side of what I dislike about it, I think the beginning response by the mortal is, for me, a huge drop off from the first stanza, beginning response from death. Not just because it uses it twice to start 2 lines, which I have a lot of issues with, along with a weak repetition in that second and third line. They also kind of condense the length, and it comes across as a response, but as one that is rooted in the mortal character not establishing itself or where it's coming from very well, but really yielding to kind of the good writing of the character that is death. The third stanza, in my opinion, does a little bit better to add clarity to what the context of the stanzas, the poem's about, both in the suicide and some of the bigger elements. I think too often Percy leans on capital letters for making sure everybody picks up on already very obvious symbolism. And in some places it feels really heavy-handed, and also feels kind of lazy, like you're not breaking down that element into something because you've decided that the symbol is just going to be love, and that is the symbol. And I get that you only have so much space in the way that he has decided to create this dialogue, but I think that it, for me, comes across as lazy, and especially in the second and third stanza. And then in the fourth stanza, I think, again, he does a really good job of kind of tying everything back together. It's way stronger than the mortal's introduction, because you actually start to get a little bit more of the mortal's perspective, who the character is. It builds a little bit of what their, not just perspective on everything that's being talked about is, but also on their kind of motives and why their dialogue is even occurring in the first place from the mortal's perspective. And I think that it goes to show you that a really strong start, because it's perfect, and a really strong beginning can really carry you through a less, in my opinion, well done middle section.
Lesser is the word you were looking for.
More lesser, yes, exactly.
Okay, I'm going to go over it now, but I think that after some of the clarifications we found to the so-called, to the seeming contradictions, I will probably need to read this poem again, and I do recommend it to other people as well, because it's not an easy poem, also because of the way it was written, but I do want to respond to something Alain said. If you notice, he capitalized all the Platonic ideals here, because death is here someone you can speak to, and so are innocence, tyranny, bigotry, futurity. So all these words aren't capitalized just for fun, but to say that just like you can have a dialogue here with death, all these other concepts are not just concepts. Like he's saying bigotry's bloodhounds. So there is a bigotry who has bloodhounds. Futurity's miscovered shore. Futurity is someone who has a shore. It's not just a concept, so to speak. And yeah, like when Alain showed me this poem last week, and by the way, like if you listen to Alain reading it, I think part of the reason that the first stanza flows better, and you see it even when you read it out loud, it's almost an iambic pentameter, which was discussed in Shakespeare sonnet, in the lesson about Shakespeare's sonnets. And if you notice, like he's using rhymes, and even though some of those lines are quite long, the rhyme actually does come through, which I think is really nice. And like the first stanza, like how death comes to the mortal, how he offers him this respite from life, from pain, this original offer, it's just incredible. But the first answer by the mortal is just weak, you know? It's sort of like a repetition on what death is saying. Yeah, you invite, like death is saying, come, leave all those pains behind, come and rest. And the mortal is saying, yeah, I want to leave all those painful things behind, and I want to rest. And there's not much to be said here. the third stanza, the response by death, I think I will need to read again now, but it still feels weaker. Like, it almost feels like platitudes, you know? It doesn't feel too deep, it just feels like platitudes. So what if he's... But yeah, he's romantic. I'm actually going to stop for a moment to read what Live Russian had to say, because it's relevant. Live Russian said, it's surely atmospheric, but a little lame. All the images, scorpions, cold habitation, silence, is too obviously related to death. It's romanticism. What else to say here? But here's the point. Like, we today look at romanticism as this full-blown thing, but if we write a piece that uses all this imagery, it's over the top. But they actually had to construct romanticism. It didn't exist before them, you know? And that's part of the charm. But even if you are a romanticist, it's not the imagery that is the problem here, but like what I often is my problem with some pieces, like it's too heavy-handed. Like he's hast thou loved, because he's saying like if you love, then you will go to heaven, and stuff like that. It's a bit too much, and I definitely agree. I think it was Daniel who called it theatrical. Like the third stanza feels like it came out of a play. Seize, wayward mortal, I dare not unveil the shadows that float over eternity's veil. And then if you were an actor on stage, then he'd like look right, look left, rub his chin, and then he said, not waits for the good, but the spirit of love. Like, you can really see it as theatrical. And I do, like I wrote to Alain also, like last week, I think like the fourth stanza is a return to form. It's not as good as the first, because it still has to it still relies a bit too much on repetition, on some of the weaker imagery. Sweet is the ray, for instance, and it sort of ends on an open question. Does he die, or does he not die? So that is an interesting question that is left open. But yeah, I think it's an interesting piece, and it's interesting also because it's not perfect, and there's a lot to say about it. So you can critique it, you can analyze it, and see, that's by Percy Shelley, which, if we're honest, nobody here is likely to be as famous of a poet as Percy Shelley. So if we can critique him, then we can easily critique one another. Before we finish, I'm sorry that we did not get to the last piece I wanted to share by Alain, because we waited for people to come. By the way, Daniel, I think it would be wise to sit in the room for a few minutes before the class begins, because people come once they see that there are people in the room. And like, if we only come to the room at exactly 6 p.m. UTC or 5 p.m. UTC, as the case might be, then people are just not going to come and sit here. Okay, so I remind once again for people, if you want to get a piece critiqued next week, between now, when this class ends, and next Wednesday, you have to leave a comment on the weekly poetry critique class, which will be posted tomorrow, or send me or Daniel a direct message linking to a comment where you leave a critique on someone else's poem. And I will actually be strict about this rule. I wonder if actually that's why people didn't show up, and if so, it's doubly sad, because it means people don't actually come to the class to listen to other people getting critique or to give critique, but only to receive critique. But let's hope it was just a coincidence. I will also take time to post probably on Monday or Tuesday, a piece with sort of like very rudimentary guidelines of what I would recommend to go over if you want to give someone critique. Like, you could go about this or that, so people would have a bit more structure if they feel they need it. And I want to thank everyone who has been here today, everyone who shared poems, everyone who left critique, and we'll see you next week.